Both the thinkers of the Enlightenment and the Romantics drew inspiration from ancient Greek mythology. The dominant mythological figure during the Enlightenment was the god Apollo. He represented many of the attributes that men and women of the Enlightenment era valued, including order, reason, balance and symmetry, and moderation. He was depicted in art as an eternal youth, an image of the dominance of all that was new and fresh and exciting, as opposed to things of the past. He was also frequently conflated with the sun, the ultimate bringer of light to a dark and shadowy world, making clear and apparent what had been hidden to previous generations. The Romantics, on the other hand, were not as interested in the Olympian god Apollo, and the cult of reason and order he represented, but rather an older, more rebellious god, the Titan, Prometheus. The Romantics appreciated that Prometheus was a loner and a rebel, refusing to obey Zeus and defying the king of the gods, even after he was sentenced to eternal torment, chained to a rock, his liver eaten by vultures. To the Romantics, Prometheus represented something true about the way they understood the world. As a Titan, he showed that the past continued to be a force that haunted the present, and the gift of fire that he gave humanity was not only helpful, but had a violent negative aspect as well. The Romantics would say we cannot ignore the power of the past, and must recognize that with every good thing we bring into the world with our ingenuity, there is a shadow side as well. The Gothic genre that Mary writes in does not only recognize the shadowy side of the good we try to do, it revels in blurring the distinction between good and bad, beautiful and ugly, alive and dead, the past and future, wakefulness and dreams, sanity and madness, love and hate. Wherein the Enlightenment tried to define the world with clear and distinct categories through the light of Apollo, the Romantics, and the Gothic in particular, retreated to murky shadows. One way Shelley does this is by showing how a purely rational ambition to know the world, an intellect without a heart, could lead to cruel and barbaric actions. She begins to develop this theme from the beginning with her depiction of Robert Walton, the Arctic explorer, intent on making a name for himself through discovery. In the opening letters to his sister, we learn that he naively believes the Arctic will be a land of pure beauty and delight, refusing to recognize the harsh and deadly environment it could become. You can see his mindset in the following passage to his sister about how he envisions his voyage. "But success shall crown my endeavors. Wherefore not? Thus far I have gone tracing a secure way over the pathless seas, the very stars themselves being witnesses and testimonies of my triumph. Why not still proceed over the untamed yet obedient element? What can stop the determined heart and resolved will of man?" But rather than taming nature, the opposite happens. His boat gets stuck in the ice on all sides and surrounded by fog, endangering the entire crew by clouding their vision and imprisoning them. It is from out of the space of imprisonment and shadow that they have a startling encounter. Walton describes it like this. "About 2 o'clock the mist cleared away, and we beheld stretched out in every direction vast and irregular plains of ice which seemed to have no end. Some of my comrades groaned, and my own mind began to grow watchful with anxious thoughts, when a strange sight suddenly attracted our attention and diverted our solicitude from our own situation. We perceived a low carriage fixed on a sledge and drawn by dogs pass on toward the north, at the distance of half a mile. A being, which had the shape of a man, but apparently of gigantic stature, sat in the sledge and guided the dogs. We watched the rapid progress of the traveler with our telescopes until he was lost among the distant inequalities of the ice. This appearance excited our unqualified wonder. We were, as we believed, many hundred miles from any land, but this apparition seemed to denote that it was not in reality so distant as we had supposed. Shut in, however, by ice, it was impossible to follow his track, which we had observed with the greatest attention. About 2 hours after this occurrence, we heard the ground sea, and before night the ice broke and freed our ship. We, however, lay to until the morning, fearing to encounter in the dark those large loose masses which float about after the breaking up of the ice. I profited of this time to rest for a few hours. In the morning, they find a half-dead man afloat in the ocean who refuses to come aboard until he finds out that they are headed to the North Pole. The lonely Walton instantly likes this aristocratic castaway and begins to see him as a friend. Walton tells the stranger of his goals of discovery, saying, "He has frequently conversed with me on mine, which I have communicated to him without disguise. He entered attentively into all my arguments in favor of my eventual success and into every minute detail of the measures I had taken to secure it. I was easily led by the sympathy which he evinced to use the language of my heart, to give utterance to the burning ardor of my soul, and to say, with all the fervor that warmed me, how gladly I would sacrifice my fortune, my existence, my every hope to the furtherance of my enterprise. One man's life, or death, were but a small price to pay for the acquirement of the knowledge which I sought, for the dominion I should acquire and transmit over the elemental foes of our race. As I spoke, a dark gloom spread over my listener's countenance. At first I perceived that he tried to suppress his emotion. He placed his hands before his eyes, and my voice quivered and failed me as I beheld tears trickle fast from between his fingers. A groan burst from his heaving breast. I paused. At length he spoke in broken accents. "Unhappy man, do you share my madness? Have you drunk also of the intoxicating draught? Hear me. Let me reveal my tale, and you will dash the cup from your lips." At the end of the opening letters, the stranger claims he will tell him a story to warn him what will happen if he continues to think this way, putting his own ambition above the lives of others, even his own, no matter how much good may come from his discoveries.